Hi everyone, and welcome today, and thanks for joining us. My name's Tim Franson, and we're hosting this public screening as part of the Creative and Responsible AI Lab program here at LSBU's Digital and Data Research Centre. So, CRAIL is an initiative co-founded by myself and Maria Gossu. It aims to foster innovation, best practice in creative and responsible use of generative AI through a program of practical workshops, talks, and public events. A couple of quick housekeeping notes. They were quite a small group. So we're on Teams. I'm recording the session. If you could just keep your mics mute, unless you're obviously speaking during the Q&A at the end. Feel free to drop questions into the chat as we go, and I'll also invite live questions after the talk. If you're comfortable, cameras on is welcome for a sort of nicer cinema experience. Well, we watch the film together. So today we're here for a screening talk and Q&A with Adrian Goycoolea. Is that Goycoolea? Is that
Goycoolea?
That's perfect. Apologies. Filmmaker, researcher, and senior lecturer in filmmaking at the University of Sussex. Adrian will be presenting AI Jetée, a shot-by-shot generative AI reconstruction of La Jetée, the sort of seminal 1962 French science fiction photo-roman or still image film by Chris Marker. The project uses generative methods to synthesize visual, sonic, and narrative elements, and it leans into the technology's sort of hallucinations and glitches to explore themes of memory time, authenticity, and authorship. So, all right, let's begin with the screening, and then we'll come back for Adrian's talk, followed by the Q&A.
Can I just say a couple things?
Yeah,
just one little thing by way of introduction of the film. The way you're going to watch the film now is a dual screen projection, which I prefer. But what you're going to be watching is the original film on the left and my generative recreation of it on the right. Both soundtracks will be playing simultaneously, and they're offset from one another. And so, you know, it's a slightly strange viewing experience, but it works, and you can follow it. There's also subtitles for you to not to lose the dialogue. But the idea is to try to both watch and listen to the sort of relationship between the two images.
Thanks, Adrian. So I'm going to share this and just check with everyone. They can see at the moment a black screen.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And I'm going to click play.
This story of a man
is a story
marked
of a man
by an image of his childhood. The violent scene which upset him, and whose meaning he was to grasp only years later, happened on the main pier at Orly, Paris airport, sometime before the outbreak of World War III. Orly, Sunday. There the parents used to take their children to watch the departing planes. Of this particular Sunday, the child whose story we are going to tell was bound to remember the sight of a frozen sun, of a stage setting at the end of the pier, and of a woman's face. Nothing tells memories from ordinary moments. Only afterwards do they claim remembrance on account of their scars. That face, which was to be a unique image of peacetime to carry with him through the whole wartime, he often wondered if he had ever seen it, or if he had dreamed a lovely moment to catch up with the crazy moment that came next. The sudden roar, a woman's gesture, the fall of a body, shrieking people. Only later did he realize that he had seen a man dying. And soon afterwards, Paris was blown up. Many died. Some fancied themselves to be victors. Others were made prisoners. The survivors settled beneath the Chaillot in a network of galleries. Above ground in Paris, as in most of the world, everything was rotten with radioactivity. The victors stood guard over a kingdom of rats. The prisoners were submitted to some experiments of great concern apparently to those who conducted them. The outcome was disappointment for some, death for others, and for others madness. One day they came to select a new guinea pig among the prisoners. He was the man whose story we are now telling. was frightened. He had heard about the head experiment and was prepared to face the mad scientist, a Dr. Frankenstein. Instead of whom he met a reasonable man who told him in a relaxed way that the human race was doomed. Space was off limits. The only link of survival passed through time. A loophole in time, and then maybe it would be possible to reach food, medicine, energy. This was the purpose of the experiment, to throw emissaries into time, to call past and future to the rescue of the present. But the human mind balked. To wake up in another time, meant to be born again as an adult. The shock would be too much. Having sent only lifeless or unconscious bodies through different zones of time, the inventors were now concentrating on men with very strong mental images. If they were able to conceive or to dream another time, perhaps, would they be able to live in it? The camp police spied even on dreams. This man was selected only because he was glued to an image of his past. At first, nothing else but the stripping out of the present. They start again. The man doesn't die, nor does he get mad. He suffers. They continue. On the 10th day, images begin to ooze like confessions. A peacetime morning. A peacetime bedroom. A real bedroom. Real children. Real birds. Real cats. Real graves. On the 16th day, he is on the pier at Orly. Empty. Sometimes he reaches the day of happiness, but another one. The face of happiness, but another one. Ruins. A girl who could be the one he is yearning for. He crosses her path on the pier. He sees her face in a car, smiling. More images pour out in mix. The museum. Perhaps the museum of his memory. 30th day they meet.
Now he is sure she is the one. As a matter of fact, it's the only thing he may be sure of. In the middle of this dateless world which first stuns him by its splendor. Around him, only fabulous materials, glass, plastic, terry cloth. Once he gets out of this fascination, the woman has gone. The directors of the experiment tighten their control. They send him back. Time rolls back again. The moment happens once more. This time she is near him. He says something. She doesn't mind. She answers. They have no memories, no plans. Time builds itself painlessly around them. As landmarks, they have the very taste of this moment they live. On the walls. A scribbling on the walls. Later on they are in a garden. He remembers there were gardens. She asks him about his necklace, his combat necklace he wore at the start of this war, which is to break out someday. He invents an explanation. They walk. They look at the trunk of a sequoia tree covered with historical dates. She pronounces an English name that he doesn't understand. As in a dream, he shows her a point beyond the tree. He hears himself say, "This is where I come from." And falls back exhausted. Then another wave of time lifts him up. They probably give him another shot. Now she sleeps in the sun. He knows that in this world, where he has just landed again for a little while, in order to be sent back to her, she is dead. She wakes up. He speaks again. Of a truth too fantastic to be believed, he retains the meaning. An unreachable country, a long way to go. She listens. She doesn't laugh. Is it another day? He doesn't know. They shall go on like this in countless walks in which an unspoken trust, an unadulterated trust will grow between them. No memories, no plans. Up to the moment where he feels ahead of them. A wall. And this was the end of the first experiment. It was the starting point for a whole series of tests in which he would meet her at different times. She welcomes him in a simple way. She calls him her ghost. One day, she seems frightened. One day she leans over him. As for him, he never knows whether he moves towards her, whether he is driven, whether he has made it up, or whether he is only dreaming. Around the 50th day, they meet in a museum filled with ageless animals. Now they have hit the bullseye. Thrown at the right moment, he may stay there and move without trouble. The girl seems also to be tamed. She accepts as a natural phenomenon the ways of the visitor who comes and goes, who exists, talks, laughs with her, stops talking, listens to her, then vanishes.
Once back at the laboratory, he knew something was different. The camp leader was there. From what was said around him, he made out that after the brilliant result of the experiment in the past, they now meant to ship him into the future. Excitement made him forget for a moment that then the meeting at the museum had been the last. The future was better protected than the past. After many painful tests, he eventually caught some waves of the world to come. He went through a brand new planet. Paris rebuilt 10,000 incomprehensible streets. Other men were waiting for him. This was a brief encounter. Obviously, they refused this slag of another time. He said his piece. Since humanity had survived, it could not refuse to its own past the means of its own survival. That sophism was taken for faith in disguise. They gave him a power plant strong enough to put all human industry in motion again. And the gates of the future were closed. Sometime after his return, he was transferred to another part of the camp. He knew that his jailers would not spare him. He had been a tool in their hands. His childhood image had been used as a bait to condition him. He had lived up to their expectations. He had played his part. Now he only waited to be executed, with somewhere inside him the memory of a twice-lived fragment of time. And deep in these limbos, he got the message from the men of the world to come. They too traveled through time and more easily. Now they were there, ready to accept him as one of their own. But he had a different request. Rather than this pacified future, he wanted the world of his childhood, and this woman who perhaps was waiting for him. Once again on the main pier at Orly, in the middle of this hot pre-war Sunday afternoon, where he was now able to settle down, he thought in a confused way that the child he had been was due to be there too, watching the planes. But first of all, he looked for a woman's face at the end of the pier. He ran towards her. And when he recognized the man who betrayed him since the camp, he knew there was no way out of time. And he knew that this haunted moment he had been granted to see as a child was the moment of his own death.
Okay, so a dazzling stereo photo montage. So what we'll go straight into is Adrian's talk. So off you go.
Thanks, Tim. And I just want to say thank you for inviting me to come and present my film and talk about it. I hope you enjoyed it. A slightly strange viewing experience, but I'm going to start my talk. So the film you just watched is a crime against cinema, at least according to Flavia Dima, the associate curator at the Bucharest International Experimental Film Festival. As you can see, I put that quote on the poster. I couldn't resist. She made that evaluation without even watching the film. It was based solely on my description of it. And she didn't stop there either. There was more. She went on to say, and I quote, throwing a pretentious yet essentially empty conceptual text, her air quotes, not mine, that justifies an absolute void of originality and the usage of destructive technology at somebody doesn't make your project any less of an insult to what makes cinema cinema and to Chris Marker and his legacy in particular. These are pretty strong feelings to have about a film that you haven't even seen. It made me wonder how ChatGPT would evaluate the film based solely on that description. So I decided to throw my pretentious text, by which I mean the same description that I gave to Flavia Dima, at ChatGPT and asked it to write a film review based on that information. Unlike Flavia, it described my film as an avant-garde masterpiece. So I put that quote on the poster too. Why not? And then it went on to say that the film was a fascinating experiment that both pays homage to and diverges from the original. The AI's interpretation of the iconic stills introduce a layer of unpredictability, at times veering into the realm of the surreal, as the characters' appearances shift and morph, reflecting the fluidity and multiplicity of identity in the digital age. This variability adds a dreamlike quality to the narrative. Indeed, thanks, ChatGPT. I mean, as you can see, it also goes on to say that it echoes the original's exploration of memory and perception from a distinctly postmodern perspective. Obviously, my tongue is firmly in my cheek here. Not only did ChatGPT not see my film, for it has no eyes, brain, or thoughts, and I assume Flavia has at least some of those. However, these contrasting evaluations underscore the questions the film seeks to interrogate: the nature of cinema, the meaning of authenticity in artistic expression, and the destabilizing effect of AI on film form. As you can see, the film is a copy of sorts. It's a shot-by-shot remake, a simulacrum even, perhaps. But it's not an exact reproduction. I tried to recreate or regenerate the original film as faithfully as possible, but the technology does not make exact duplicates. In fact, I think that screening the two films together at the same time is really the ideal way to watch the film, because AI Jetée is always in conversation with the original. So you can't watch one without thinking of the other, really. What you've just experienced is not simply my film and Marker's film running at the same time, but you actually get a sort of third experience that exists in the collision between the two of them, as you attempt to hold both of them in your mind at once. This matters because it shifts the ground of the discussion. If the work is received as a standalone object, it invites one set of judgments. If it's received as a comparative instrument, it invites others. Side by side turns the remake into a method. And with that in mind, I will describe the method now as clearly as possible. Actually, why not have my AI avatar do that for me? Oops.
Hi, I'm Adrian's AI avatar. I was created using a platform called HeyGen. Adrian provided this model with a 3-minute video of himself talking about some rubbish, and now this avatar can say any written text he provides it. Anyway, I'm here to explain the process that he followed to remake La Jetée using generative AI while he has a drink or goes to the bathroom or something. So, Adrian used Midjourney version 5 to recreate the film's still images. The process of recreating the images involved using 2 prompts for the model to work from. The first was an image prompt. This involved uploading an image from the film he wanted the model to recreate. He then had to pair that image prompt with a text prompt that described what was in the image. Since he wanted as close a replica of the original as possible, he described what was in the image to the best of his ability, and then something about the texture and quality of the photograph. So, for instance, this image would be paired with a text prompt that went something like, black and white photograph of 3 flight attendants on the tarmac in the 1960s. They wear hats and coats and carry hand luggage, film grain, photoreal, Leica 50mm lens, Nouvelle Vague, in the style of Cartier-Bresson. Aspect ratio, 16:9. Image weight, 2.0, version 5. These two prompts would produce something like what you see there on the right. Or an image like this would get paired with a text prompt that went something like, black and white photograph of the interior of a bombed-out church, rubble on the floor, light streams in through the stained glass windows, World War II war photography, film grain, Leica 35mm lens, in the style of Robert Capa. Aspect ratio, 16:9. Image weight, 2.0, version 5, which would produce something like that again on the right. Or in this example, the image on the left, together with this text prompt, would give you something like that on the right. Black and white close-up photograph of a man with a mustache looking directly at the camera. He looks scared. Photorealistic. Film grain. Leica 50mm lens in the style of Ouija. Blah 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 tech stuff. You get the idea. You can see from these examples that although the images are remarkably similar, they are by no means identical. However, Midjourney seems to be able to handle these unambiguous images better than others. When it encounters something more unusual, things go awry. What is even going on here? You can see that it has completely lost the plot. Or here. Or here. The algorithm simply couldn't understand how hammocks work, or what that weird eye mask was, despite how carefully he tried to describe it. Most of the time, the AI would produce images where the eye mask was not over the person's eyes at all. Adrian used many different prompts to try and get it to put the mask in the right place. He would describe the person as needing eye bandages. He described them as sleeping masks. Nothing worked. He even tried uploading the image and asking the algorithm to describe what it sees, and then using that text as his text prompt. That was no better. Adrian quickly realized that he could spend ages trying to find different ways to describe the photograph, to see if he could get a closer approximation of the original image with no guarantee of success. So, he decided to give himself a rule. He would allow himself only 5 attempts at crafting different prompts, and if after 5 attempts he still couldn't produce a similar image, he would just pick one of the 20 that were generated and move on. Usually, this consisted of simply picking the only version that had something covering the person's eyes. And there were other ways that the model failed to approximate the images, particularly when it came to character consistency. When generating images featuring characters from the original film, the results from the AI varied significantly each time. Each new generation produced a similar but entirely different person. The new generations often looked more like cousins of the original actors rather than their duplicates. This variability introduced an unintended layer of complexity, presenting our lead as a gallery of familiar yet distinct individuals. For instance, here we see many versions of the man, played by Davos Hanek, and as you can see, these guys look all like relatives of Hanek, some more distant than others. Or here we see variations of the actress, playing the woman, Hélène Chatelain. Again, lots of different pretty women here, but none of them exactly her twin. Or finally, here we see Jacques Ledoux, who played the experimenter. Look at how different the ages are of this man. There are ways Adrian could have maintained character consistency. For instance, one technique would have been to cast different celebrities as each character. So, he could have always asked for Harrison Ford, for example, in all the shots of the man, or always used Jennifer Lawrence for the woman, but that would have added a layer of pop culture to the film that he thought would have been distracting. Also, he liked the fragmentation that these inconsistent characters gave to the film. He felt like it took the original time travel narrative and expanded it to the multiverse. For the soundtrack, he used 3 other programs. He voice cloned the English language voiceover performer, James Kirk, using 11 Labs. Actually, I think maybe it's time to hand it back over to real-life Adrian. AI Adrian over and out.
So yeah, for the voice cloning, I cloned James Kirk's voiceover using 11 Labs. I uploaded a clean piece of voiceover and created the clone, and then transcribed the voiceover text from the film and had the clone reperform it. Again, this was also not an exact replica that I think you were able to tell from the side-by-side screening, right? You could hear the two of them together. The clone had a slightly more American accent. The performance was also very different. It was much more flat. And then I also used Resemble AI to create these whispering voices, right? There was a male and a female whispering voice in those sections that they were speaking German, right? So I used Resemble because that was the only one at the time that I could find that was able to do a whispering voice. And although I couldn't really make out the German, and I don't speak German, but also was somewhat unintelligible, what I did instead was I took the text from sort of academic work that was analyzing the soundtrack of La Jetée and translated it into German and used that as the sort of German whispering that was going on in the film, right? Here's just an example of the whispering on its own.
Ähnlich verstanden im Stellen wird Tests worden in Hollywood-Filmen dieser Zeit aufgegriffen, weil die vorhergehenden Auseinandersetzungen mit Filmmusik zeigt. Die Diamondgen in THX 1138 Lansage. So there you could even hear obviously the text that I took it from refers to George Lucas's film THX 1138. So you can hear bits of those artifacts in there. So yeah. For the score, that was a little bit trickier in the sense that I had to try to find music that would work. I used a model called AIVA, I think you pronounce it, AIVA, to generate a new score. But the way that was done was that with that program, you're able to upload a sample of music and have it be the sort of influence for the generated outputs. So I took the score from La Jetée, uploaded it, and then had it generate variations on that. Many of them weren't very interesting or good. Again, I gave myself a limit of how many I could do, how many generations. I think I did 5 as well. And then I picked the one that I liked the most. I made sure to keep the key in the same, the generation in the same key as the original and try to match the mood as best I could. So here we can hear 2 versions of the score. So this is the prologue, the girl prologue from the original film. So, and then the AI generated version would be like this. So you can see that there's a sort of similarity there, but there's not quite the same. But I find it really fascinating when you play the 2 of them together at the same time on the double screening that they kind of work together. The AI one sort of fits in with the other one and they create this new piece together. So I found that to be particularly interesting. The one thing that I couldn't generate at the time from the film was the soundtracks, right? So I've done the score, I've done the voiceover, but not the soundtrack, the sound effects, right? At the time, there was no AI generative sound effects that you could make. So what I had to do there was just resource similar sound effects from sound effects libraries or record some myself to redo them. Then I used the original film as a sort of guide track to my edit, so that I would place all these elements in the same place as the original film, right? So that was another sort of guide, in the shot-by-shot nature of the film to try to really kind of recreate it as closely and faithfully as possible. I should mention, though, that that the film obviously is 2 years old. I was using Midjourney version 5. We're now on version 7, right? In AI terms, that's like already another era. The tools have advanced dramatically since then. You can do soundtracks now, right? You can do all these sound effects. There are also ways in which you can maintain character consistency now across generations. You can do video that is much more plausible than you could back then. So, you know, not only is the technology sort of evolved, and maybe those eye masks would be solvable today, but more significantly, the conversation around AI has also evolved and changed. You know, in 2026, this was sort of new technology that I was exploring, but now there's much more negativity around AI. The using it is no longer as neutral as it was back then. I mean, it was never fully neutral, but it was a little bit more open-ended. And now people are much more resistant to that technology, even more than they were 2 years ago. And in a sense, the film has also become a sort of document of a particular moment in AI development, right? At the time, the tools were strong enough to attempt the reconstruction, but unstable enough to fail in ways that I thought were meaningful or interesting, right? That they fail less often now, right? The fidelity of the generations are much more stable, which is good and bad in many ways, right? And going back to also thinking about watching the two films together as a viewing experience, I do think that side-by-side screening produces a specific kind of attention, right? It makes comparison unavoidable. It forces you to ask what continuity is, what identity is, what the same shot means, and what fidelity could possibly mean in this context, right? And I think that three things become visible, right? In La Jetée, continuity from one image to the other is built from stillness, montage, narration, and the viewer's own reconstruction of movement, right? That was sort of the point that Chris Marker was exploring in making the film using still images, right? The film mobilizes your participation. In AI Jetée, that continuity becomes editorial labor under unstable conditions, you know, where identities drift, but the sequences may remain legible through the narrator's storytelling and the editing structure of the original film, right? We can still follow this story even though the characters are shifting, right? And again, this is because the film is firmly anchored in the original and the original story have not changed. So in some ways, AI Jetée is like memory, right? Memory reconstructs, right? It fills in gaps, it substitutes, it approximates, right? Whenever we remember something, we're not just recalling those memories, we're regenerating them ourselves. We are creating them anew, we're writing these new neurons every time. So AI does something similar. It generates images that feel plausible, but have no indexical relationship to reality anymore. There's also no direct, repeatable relationship to the original film, right? If I were to make this film again using the exact same prompts, I wouldn't get any of the same images. In fact, even at the time when I was making them, every time I put in the prompt, it would generate a different result. So there was never a point in which you could just recreate all these images again using the same prompting information, right? So this is because AI is not metaphorical, right? The AI literally does not remember the original image. Like memory, it reconstructs from patterns, but unlike memory, it has never seen anything. What looks like forgetting is actually inference from a training set that may or may not have included that specific film. And there's also likely guardrails built into the model to avoid any direct duplication or copyright infringement, right? These companies don't want to get sued, so they make it difficult for you to just regenerate the original faithfully. You probably could do it. So the work then becomes like a comparative instrument, right? Side by side turns the remake into an instrument for measuring the gap between the photographed still and the synthesized still, between the index and the inference, between the archival trace and a statistical pattern. So like ChatGPT said about the film, one might argue that AI Jetée is a postmodern film. The film ticks quite a lot of the boxes of postmodernism, right? So we've got here skepticism towards grand narratives, intertextuality, bricolage, pastiche, etc. It ticks many of these boxes. Whoops, my PowerPoint frozen? Nope, here we go. By fragmenting the identities, the film's characters by fragmenting the identity of the film's characters into ever-changing variations, the work resonates with Lyotard's skepticism towards grand narratives. Through AI-generated pastiche, it also aligns with Frederick Jameson's account of postmodern culture as recycling history while stripping it of its depth, context, or political charge. If we bring in Baudrillard, we can also see that the film is a simulacrum. It's a copy without an origin, without an origin that we can point to cleanly. And for many critics of AI, there is a specific original that must not be lost, right? The originary performance, the actor's face, the authorial trace. In AI Jetée, the original becomes in AI Jetée, the original becomes harder to locate at the level of the image. What remains stable is the template of the edit. What becomes unstable is the apparent human referent. However, the postmodern frame doesn't fully explain what the film feels like and what it feels like to watch it. And for that, I think there's another concept that I think is more useful. It's Deleuze's idea of the crystal image, right? Deleuze's concept of the crystal image is useful here because it describes an interpretation of the actual and the virtual, the present and the past, the seen image and the remembered image, right? In La Jetée, the still photographs function as slices of time, actualities frozen yet teeming with potentialities. They carry the virtual within them. Each still image is both a narrative moment and a reservoir of memory and anticipation. Watching the film, you oscillate, the original film, La Jetée, you oscillate between the image on screen and the time traveler's mental images of that image. This is made explicit in the sequence where he reflects on the reality of these memories, these mental images, right? These real children, these real birds, these real cats, and these real graves, right? And in fact, these real graves here points to another idea, right? To Andre Bazin's idea of photography as, he basically names photography as a force that can embalm time, right? A photograph preserves a moment that defies decay, right? Which is what gives us that weird feeling that we can look at classical Hollywood movie stars. They're always forever at that age, and then, obviously they die. But the question that AI Jetée raises is what happens when this apparent photographic preservation is replaced by synthesis? The images in AI Jetée exist as images, as in that they are actual in that sense. Their referent is virtual. They do not originate from a captured moment. They originate from a training archive and an inference process. This is why the film can feel both simultaneously photographic and hallucinatory. If the crystal image describes a fusion of, if the crystal image describes a fusion of the actual and the virtual in classical cinema, AI Jetée extends that fusion into the production process itself. The actual image is generated from a virtual archive. The virtual becomes a condition of the actual. This is one of the reasons why the side-by-side screening is so revealing. The original stills carry the pressure of index, and the remake stills carry the pressure of the plausible. The viewer experiences the gap repeatedly. At this point, a predictable question arises, right, between the relationship between the indexical and the artwork, which is, how is this different from animation, right? Animation also bears no indexical relationship to reality in that they are all hand-drawn. So very briefly, I will just say that the difference here is that traditional animation is the product of a human craft and intention. It's shaped frame by that human subjectivity. And the result may be imaginary, but the authorship chain is legible, right? And deliberate, as a deliberate construction. We know that an artist drew this. But the question with AI-generated stuff is that that audit chain is no longer clean, right? It isn't really, is this like animation? Well, it isn't that it's not related to the actualities, but the difference is that it's that black box problem of AI, right? We can't see the process by which that image was created, right? We can infer it, but we don't know all the information. You can speak about prompting, prompts and selecting and editing and the constraints I made. But you also have to acknowledge that the image arrives through a process that neither you nor the audience can fully audit from the surface. This opacity is part of the problem, both aesthetic and ethically. And that's why I'm working on some other AI-generated films at the moment to try to explore this tension a little bit further under different constraints, right? So one film that I'm working on is a film called Saint Esprit, which is it's a sequel to Chris Marker's famous film Sans Soleil. And AI Jetée and Sans Soleil are often kind of screened together. The DVD puts the two films together, although they are different. Sans Soleil is a film made up from home movie footage, some shot by Chris Marker, some that he sourced, from different archives, edited together through a voiceover that imagines a traveler traveling the world and filming things, observing things, and sending these sort of packages to a friend along his travels with letters and stuff. That the voiceover is the person receiving these packages from Sandor Krasner as he travels the world, and reflecting on the nature of the images and the nature of travel. And it's a really beautiful, evocative piece of Marker's that I've always loved. So I thought it might be useful to make that film again, but rather than do the same thing I did in AI Jetée of doing a shot-by-shot recreation, I thought I would sort of continue that story and imagine a sequel to that film. And I wanted to use as many AI-generated things as possible. So with this film, I wrote the script together with ChatGPT. I would give it prompts and it would generate text. I tried to make it match the style of the original voiceover. And all the elements are AI generated: the video, the sound effects, the voiceover, and the music. And I'm just going to show you a little snippet of it because I don't want to take up a lot of time, but just so you can get a sense of that work. So can everybody see this here? This is just, I'm going to play you the very beginning of both films. So this is the beginning of Sans Soleil for those of you who haven't seen it.
The first image he told me about was of 3 children on a road in Iceland in 1965. He said that for him it was the image of happiness, and also that he had tried several times to link it to other images, but it never worked. He wrote me, "One day I'll have to put it all alone at the beginning of a film with a long piece of black leader. If they don't see happiness in the picture, at least they'll see the black." He wrote, "I'm just back from Hokkaido, the northern island. Rich and hurried Japanese take the plane, others take the ferry. Waiting, immobility, snatches of sleep. Curiously, all of that makes me think of a past or future war. Night trains, air raids, fallout shelters, small fragments of war enshrined in everyday life. He liked the fragility of those moments suspended in time, those memories whose only function had been to leave behind nothing but memories. He wrote, "I've been around the world several times, and now only banality still interests me. On this trip, I've tracked it with the relentlessness of a bounty hunter. At dawn, we'll be in Tokyo."
Okay, so you get the sense there of a sort of meditative voiceover of somebody reading these letters coming from their friend. And so this is just to give you a sense. I'm going to play a little bit of this, get a sense of what I did. This I did about a year ago.
I thought I had received his last letter back in 1985, but here it was, another letter. The postmark read 2005, but even that felt uncertain, as if time had smudged the ink before it settled. Inside, a single sheet of paper, folded with the same precision as always. His handwriting hadn't changed, though the ink seemed to carry the weight of years that weren't accounted for. Along with the letter, there was a compact disc, an object already fading from memory, like a relic from a future that had passed too quickly. The first image appeared. Rome, the Colosseum, standing resilient in the soft light of a fading sun. It hadn't changed, but perhaps that was the point. He always began with something familiar, a place that felt timeless. But this time, there was something else. The light and shadows didn't quite match, a subtle inconsistency he didn't mention but must have noticed. I read his words as the images moved slowly across the screen. "I've returned," he wrote. "To Rome, of course. But is it the same Rome? I wonder if these places we visit are ever truly real, or just versions of themselves, echoes, endlessly repeating." He always had a way of pulling you in, making you question the certainty of what you saw. The city felt familiar, yet distant, like a memory trying to remember itself. I kept watching, waiting for what would come next, knowing that with him, nothing was ever quite as it seemed.
So basically this, my version takes it, as if she's continuing to receive these letters, but now the traveler is jumping around in time as well. So not just in locations. This is sort of premise. And then slowly the two of them, the reader of these letters starts to notice things in the image that couldn't be true, starts to question the reality of those images, but then also the reality of herself, realizing that both the writer and the receiver of the letters are both fictional and not real, basically. It's like, that was the idea of that one. I'm still not entirely sure it works, but it was my next experiment in playing around with this idea. The other thing I wanted to now show you, let me go back to sharing the right thing, and now share my PowerPoint again. I'm now working on another version of AI Jetée. Hold on, let me get to the right slide. I've decided to do sort of AI Jetée 2.0, where my idea is, can everyone see this okay? Yeah, okay. So my idea is to take the images from La Jetée. So for instance, this is the opening shot, and animate them so that we get something like this. Or this, becomes this. This famous shot. So basically, I'm curious what happens if I kind of ruin the original. If I take the original, the whole premise, which was to take the images and have the viewer sort of fill in the gaps in between as an act of memory, right? The mental work of kind of doing that animation in your head, of thinking of this as a motion film rather than just a series of stills. Like, what does that do to the film if I take that away, if I make it a series of moving images rather than still images? So again, it's using AI to try to better understand the original, right? To see where, if this, you know, my thinking is that this is going to make the film less interesting ultimately, but also going to produce some other qualities that one hadn't anticipated. But I have to say, I'm getting much less bad results from this new version than I was originally, right? It pretty much does what I want it to do, which I also think is somewhat interesting, if maybe a little bit boring. So this brings me to the end of my talk here, where I just want to just highlight that I have some misgivings about all this, right? I have misgivings about the technology, right? My work is playful. My method invites sort of a kind of playful thinking through of what the technology does, but the phrase destructive technology still resonates in some ways. Generative systems operate by accumulating vast amounts of cultural material and recombining it without conscious intention. Artists have always worked this way, right? Through influence and quotation and reference. But this mode of accumulation is structurally different in scale and in opacity, right? If détournement and collage historically functioned as subversion, the dominant direction of industrial AI often functions as capture. It captures cultural labor, it captures patterns, it captures styles, and then it sells that capture back into the world as service, as a service. This is not an argument that artists should never touch these tools. It's an argument that the tools arrive within a political economy that cannot be ignored, right? The reality is that AI will replace jobs, or at the very minimum will restructure them. It compresses labor markets and devalues certain forms of skilled production. Voice actors are already seeing their work dry up. Concept artists are being asked to clean up AI generations rather than create from scratch. So if survival depends on selling labor, and if machines reduce the need for human labor, then the pressure does not fall evenly. It falls hardest on those that are already precarious and on those whose work can be approximated cheaply. And that's why I think the conversation about AI aesthetics sits next to questions about redistribution and economic security. Universal basic income appears to be a coherent response. If machines generate value, that value should be redistributed. If automation expands, economic security cannot remain tied to exclusivity and employment. Whether one agrees with UBI or not, the underlying issue remains. We currently organize social survival around labor in ways that become quite brittle under automation. So my final misgiving is actually epistemic. Still images already carry persuasive force. Motion images carry more. When synthetic images move, they can acquire an authority that they have not yet earned. This is not an abstract worry, right? It shapes how I feel about making work that looks photographic while being generated. And it shapes how I present the work, right? I always disclose that it was AI generated. The point is the AI generation with the insistence that the instability is part of the content.
and with an attempt to keep the audience alert to the gap between plausibility and provenance. But AI-generated images are already fueling misinformation and cynicism towards any kind of photographic evidence. This, I fear, is the true danger of AI, a further eroding of society's shared set of facts. So in 2023, when I made AI Jetée, I was asking what happens when we play with these tools, and what does it tell us about, the nature of memory or culture. 3 years later, I still think that might be the right question, but the stakes have been clarified. The tools are here, the displacement is happening, and the epistemic crisis is real. So the question becomes, how do we create in this world? How do we ensure that what we make serves human flourishing rather than its opposite? How do we build systems where creativity doesn't require precarity? I think that moving towards universal basic income is a starting point, and that starting point should be created through progressive taxation. But that's perhaps a subject for another talk. Thank you so much for listening. I can take some questions now.
Thanks so much for that. You've answered most of my questions that I had jotted down. I guess I'll kick off with just a couple of, I think maybe a short one. Just what tools? So you use AI generative tools to create kind of like the assets, if you like, image, voice, and music. What conventional editing tools and post-production tools do you use?
Well, I edited using Premiere Pro. Was my main thing. I think I did all of it in Premiere Pro.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, mostly just regular online editing. And like I said, the system was really just putting the original film on my timeline and editing to that original film.
Yeah. So that kind of became your score, if you like. Yeah.
Exactly.
And what were your sort of key decision points? You mentioned, I'm going to, rather than kind of doom generations, I'm going to say cap it at 5, for example, generations. And where did sort of human judgment matter the most? And so where AI just simply took over, or is there a sort of sweet spot that you
found? Well, I think that relationship between the human and the AI in creating these works, I think, is fluid and it changes. But for me, I felt that at the time when I made the film, when people watched it, I think they imagined that I just sort of uploaded the original film to an AI model and it output this movie or something, right? But it really wasn't like that at all, because every single step I required me to do a lot of thinking and making choices. I had to think of how I was, I had to think of the idea first of all, right? And make the connection between the original film and what happens when it's AI generated. The AI wouldn't have done that on its own. I had to have the impetus to do it. Then I had to generate the prompt to try to get it to do it. And that took some experimentation. I tried different ways. So me learning prompt engineering to try to get the result that I wanted from the model. Once I kind of figured out the sort of language and I had a sort of system, I'm like, okay, now I can continue working. But then I had to evaluate all the outputs. I had to evaluate which worked best for what I was trying to do, which is the closest approximation to the original, right? But that also, there's different versions, and that's an aesthetic judgment that I was making each time, right? Mm-hmm. And then when I realized that could go on indefinitely, when I encountered a problem and I realized that no matter how many different ways I had to generate a prompt to try to get it to do this eye mask, it never was doing it right. Then I had to just give myself a limit and say, okay, I can't do this endlessly. I'll just stop at 5 attempts, and then I'll choose one of the 20, right? So then that becomes a choice of the least bad option, right?
And in some ways, it's kind of mechanical once I kind of set up the parameters. So I'm also functioning a bit like an AI in the sense that I'm just kind of executing my plan. I'm putting it together to see what it looks like. But still, I think that in every element of it, there's a sort of human aesthetic judgment that's going in.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, because I really like the the sort of AI still image film approach for storytelling, especially for students on no to micro budgets. And I sort of love to explore maybe sort of integrating something like that into the CRAIL program. So groups using La Jetée as the scaffolding, and groups creating different scenes using local based tools and different diffusion models, because I guess when you're using cloud tools, you kind of create a workflow for yourself, and then the big tech change or don't allow you to use the diffusion models anymore, and the latest and greatest is used, so they can kind of there's a barrier there. So if you have your models downloaded, you can establish something that is then kind of repeatable, and you can sort of learn how to control, rather than these sort of, you kind of create your prompts and every time it's a new image, so rather than one that you can kind of tweak. So I can see, I kind of think your work could be like the starting point of a sort of creative pedagogical method that along the way you could kind of raise environmental ethical questions, really analyze some older works. So I've tried some stuff, but in terms of publishing, and sort of do reimaginations of past ancient publications and seeing how that kind of unravels, and what you kind of learn about the original, if you like, is kind of and what new surprises might be in store. So a way of rereading using through the lens of machine, and so I kind of sort of think about what could grow into like a cross university collaborative film kind of project, and so an expanded sort of multiverse sort of science fiction story seeded from Chris Marker's original film, where different identities could be, say, the woman and the man could be flipped, and so forth. So I think it could be sort of, I find it super interesting.
Well, there is also, I see online interesting ways in which people use this stuff to kind of engage with popular culture. There's so many memes and things. I mean, I'm just thinking, like, I just recently saw somebody using Seed Dance to kind of fix the ending of Titanic, where Leo didn't, dies. And it's actually now looks quite convincing, like it's almost like they've reshot that movie, right? So it is, I like this idea of sort of fan culture getting in there and using this technology to kind of engage with to engage with culture directly in that way, right? Again, it's all of these things I think work when it's AI, it's done as a sort of humorous kind of engagement with the technology in order to make these points. I think you can make satire, right? There's all kinds of political satire that is done. I mean, what I like about AI is the democratizing of it. Like this technology, like VFX and all this stuff that would be really out of the reach of most low budget or student filmmakers is now something that they could actually produce. In that sense, it's great, right? But on the bad sense is many of our students may have trouble getting a job in the traditional film world. So there's like pros and cons always, right? And my students are, I don't know about your students, but my students are very negative around AI. Whenever I try to give them assignments in class, they're really resistant to using it at all.
because they think that of it as a plagiarism machine, environmental catastrophe machine. I mean, they don't really like to use it for their creative work. But then when I am grading their academic papers, I can see a lot of use of ChatGPT. So it's fine in that context, right? But it's not fine when it's about their art.
Yeah. No, I say fashion communication students, they've really found it super useful, and I've have to sort of bring in the catastrophe to make, so they've kind of, the uptake has been curious but without sort of resistance, but they're not artists, so maybe there's a difference there, I guess. But we could carry on chatting. I'm going to see anyone in the group, if you could pop your hand up, or I think because we're so small, you could pop your hand up and unmute, and I'll just see if I can see everyone. Would anyone like to unmute? And Christina's got a hand up.
Yes, thank
Thanks,
you.
Christina.
Digitally and analog as well. Yeah, thanks, Adrian. Great work. It actually not really a question, because much like Tim, I think you've answered a lot of the questions that I was having throughout the session. But it's more of amusing. It made me think about Douglas Gordon's 24-hour cycle, and like what that intense slow-mo can do to a film, and how that's being seen. And I don't know whether in 1993 that was outrageous, but I quite like the outrageousness of the work that you've made. I think that's actually a very interesting thing, the tension. The really bad criticisms that you got from the film festival curator. It also made me think about Henri Sala's piece, Ravel, Ravel, Unravel. I don't know if you're familiar with it. From the 2013 Venice Biennale, he was representing the German pavilion, and his piece is sort of trying, these two different piano players trying to interpret a Ravel composition, and obviously both of them doing it slightly differently, and it's these overlaps of professionals trying to do something, and then the DJ at the end of the room trying to kind of incorporate and overlay these, like make these two professionals outputs in sync, and so it's like all these different inputs, all these different kind of professional ways of looking at a compositor's piece and how it's remade. It made me think about what you've done with like in collaboration with the AI. So I think as a co-creation tool, I think AI still has merit. Obviously, it is mired with so many ethical issues, but I think it raises an interesting discussion, and I do like the fact that you said your 2.0 try with La Jetée is probably more boring. I sort of agree. I think it's quite nice to see the original paired with the AI, and I think we kind of have that conversation and we have that reference, and I think it's quite cleverly done. Obviously, having moving image, I don't know, it might do something for the piece. It might do something for you also as a researcher. But I was just thinking that it's really interesting to see how the AI fails, and it's almost pleasing to see how the AI sort of fails to capture some of the images and things that are common sense to us humans. I mean, it's something that obviously we observe every day when generating AI, but clearly now, because things have progressed and it's 2026, you did this 3 years ago, things are working on a much better in a much better quality and fidelity compared to 3 years ago only. I don't know whether you'll get the same results,
No, but I might get to. I want to go through the process to see what it does. I mean, even just to see like a bad version of AI Jetée that's like now with motion, it's kind of. I don't know whether I think it's funny, but I think that joke. I don't know if that joke lasts 28 minutes, so we'll see. But the one thing I did want to say though is that. This idea of regenerating AI Jetée using generative AI also is not unique. There's been two or three other films that I know of that have recreated AI Jetée using generative AI. And I was on a panel at King's, 2 years ago, I think, where there were three films of La Jetée that were made with generative AI. One was by Juliana Zelinska, and the other one was by a filmmaker called Grease, a Spanish filmmaker. And what's really interesting about those is that I think Zelinska's film, this was a very early film, like I think it was 2020 or something like that, and she trained a model on the images from La Jetée. So that was the data set. And then she had to generate new images. But all those images are really abstract. None of them are representational. They just look like abstract black and white photography. There's sort of grain, film grain and stuff, but it doesn't resolve into people. And then she took the first line of the film and fed it into ChatGPT and had it generate a story based on that first line. And so the story is also completely made up from ChatGPT, and then she read it out herself over these images. And, it's a shorter film, it's like 10 minutes or whatever. And it's a very interesting film. But what's interesting about it is that it also was sort of capturing that very early moment of generative AI for images, right? And then the next one was Grease's film, what she did was take each individual line of the film and use that as the prompt for an image, right? But at the moment that those images were made, they were quite naff. It was very early generative AI. Everything looked kind of cartoony. It looked kind of garish. And there's all these, like, she just kind of has this wipe going all the way through. So it's almost like you're on a train and these still images are coming by like this. So again, that's like kind of, the next version of the AI where it looked more like AI slop, right? And then my film is closer to the original, but still fails, right? So it's at this moment where like it's almost good. And I feel like now we're in a moment where we can just you can create AI generated stuff that is hard to differentiate from non-AI generated stuff, which puts us into a whole weird, uncomfortable world. But I just think those films together through this reenactment of this film is a really interesting sort of like triptych of kind of AI generation.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, it also tells us about the progression of AI and about the like the evolution of the AI, like of AI, Gen AI as a medium for making. So yeah, definitely very interesting stuff.
I always like to think of the outputs from the image generators as infographics of the data set. And that's kind of what they're not a photograph, they're something new, aren't they? I think we're almost we've rolled over. We could talk much more. One person did have a hand up, but I think they've had to go, which was so I just would like to say thank you everyone for joining us today, and big thank you to Adrian for the film talk and conversation. I think I'm going to go away and have a go at making the Museum of Ageless Animals. So I kind of want to, and I might flip the animals to be wandering around and the humans to be the stuffed creatures or something. I don't know, in my in my multiverse. So I'll share the today's recording over the next couple of days, and also I'll send a link to Adrian's doppelganger presentation, which is super good, super funny. I enjoyed it a lot. I like the hands. I kind of there's this kind of, the gestures are
and sometimes it goes this way,
particularly when you're not saying anything, or when your avatar is not saying anything. I do find that quite funny. And so thanks again for being here and for thoughtful questions, comments, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.